An elderly woman leaves her old life behind. What seemed like a welcoming new beginning soon transforms into a subtle cycle of control and erasure. Gradually, she discovers that they are trying to erase her not only from her family's memory, but also from her very existence, until she decided to break the chains, and the noise echoed everywhere. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you are watching us from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you will ever hear in your life. In the small town of Hillsborough, nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, where the fresh mountain air contrasted with the warmth of human relations, Connie O'Malley, a 76-year-old woman, watched the moving truck driver unload her last belongings. Her wrinkled hands, marked by decades of work as a seamstress, trembled slightly as she adjusted the flower brooch on the lapel of her wool coat. It was a simple piece, a gift from her late friend June, which she carried as an amulet during important moments. "Mom, let me handle this. You'll end up hurting yourself," said Roger, her only son, a 48-year-old public servant who had inherited from Connie only her deep brown eyes, but not her natural kindness. He took the small box of old photographs from his mother's hands, which she insisted on carrying personally. "It's all right, my son. These are my memories," Connie replied with a shy smile, yielding to her son's insistence. The two-story house, painted a faded yellow, was located in a traditional neighborhood of the historic town. It was an old construction that had belonged to Connie's family for generations, but which she had put in her son's name years ago to avoid future problems, as she used to say. After retirement and some health issues, the decision to live with Roger, his wife Sandra, and their teenage grandchildren seemed the ideal solution for an elderly woman who was starting to feel the weight of loneliness. "Roger, where's the box with your mother's medications?" Sandra's voice echoed from the porch, sharp as a razor disguised in a tone of concern. Tall, with artificially dyed blonde hair and always impeccably dressed, Sandra O'Malley had built her reputation as a real estate agent in the region, known as much for her efficiency as for her calculating coldness in business. "I'm taking it, love," Roger replied, hurrying with the medicine box, leaving his mother behind in the garden. Connie took a deep breath, smelling the hydrangeas that adorned the entrance of the house. She tried to push away the discomfort she felt whenever Sandra looked at her, as if she were evaluating a problematic property that needed to be renovated or demolished. "It will work out," she repeated to herself, like a mantra she had been using since she decided to accept her son's invitation to live together. "Mrs. O'Malley." A husky, friendly voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Mr. Sebastian, the neighbor, about 70 years old, who took care of the garden next door. "It's good you've come to live here. It will liven up our street." Connie smiled genuinely for the first time that day. "Thank you, Mr. Sebastian. I hope to be a good neighbor." "The best, I'm sure. If you need anything at all, Daisy and I are here," he replied, pointing to his wife, who waved from the window of the neighboring house. The rest of the day passed between unpacking boxes and organizing memories. The room designated for Connie was not what she had imagined. It was located at the back of the house, a small room that previously served as a pantry, hastily adapted with a single bed, an old wardrobe, and a small side table. "It's temporary, Mum," Roger explained, avoiding looking Connie in the eyes, "until we organize things better." Connie merely nodded, swallowing her disappointment. After all, she was grateful to have a place to stay, and the most important thing was to be close to her family. She carefully unwrapped a small statue of Our Lady of Grace, placing it on the side table next to a photo frame with a picture of her late husband, Anthony. The first week was about adaptation. Connie tried to find her place in the household routine, offering to help prepare meals or take care of the house, but Sandra always had a ready excuse. "No need, Mrs. O'Malley. Zelda already does all that," she would say, referring to the cleaner who came 3 times a week. "You need to rest." The forced rest turned Connie's days into a succession of empty hours, filled only by the sound of the television on minimum volume, not to disturb, and by the rare visits of her grandchildren, Luke and Mary Ann, who seemed more interested in their cell phones than in their grandmother's stories. A month after her arrival, during dinner, Sandra announced a small change in the family dynamic. "Roger and I talked, Mrs. O'Malley, and we think it's better if you contribute a little to the household expenses. You—" "No?" Sandra spoke with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "After all, we are now a family of 5, and everything has become more expensive." Connie slowly placed her fork next to her plate. "Of course, Sandra. I can contribute with part of my pension." "Actually," Roger interrupted, "we thought of something simpler. Since the house is technically mine and you no longer have rent expenses, it would be fair to transfer the entire property to my name and use the value of your pension for the expenses here." The silence that followed was as dense as the fog that sometimes covered Hillsborough on winter mornings. Connie felt a tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with her heart problems. The house, the last link to her independence, was being taken not out of necessity, but out of convenience. "Son, I only put half the house in your name. The other part is still mine. I left it that way to have security in my old age." "Mom," Roger interrupted, his voice hardening, "we are offering you security here. Or do you prefer to live alone at 76? Sandra placed her hand on Roger's as if calming, and encouraging him at the same time. "Think of it as a family arrangement, Mrs. O'Malley, everyone contributing in the way they can." That night, alone in her small, stuffy room, Connie opened a box she hadn't yet unpacked. Among old documents and yellowed photos, she found a hardcover diary, a gift from a former student from the days when she taught sewing at the neighborhood association. She sat on the bed and began to write, as she had done in moments of doubt since she was young. "Today I realized that what I thought was a safe haven might actually be a prison disguised as a home," she wrote with a trembling hand. "But I cannot judge prematurely. Perhaps it is just the difficult beginning of a new phase." Outside the window, a small abandoned flower bed caught her attention. Among the tall weeds, some flowers persisted, colorful and stubborn, just as she had been her entire life. Connie fell asleep planning how to transform that small space into a garden she could call her own. She needed roots, even if they were those of the geraniums she loved so much to cultivate. What Connie didn't imagine was that the abandoned flowerbed in the backyard would be the beginning of a silent battle that would test not only her love for her son, but her own will to live with dignity. Now, I will continue with the second chapter of the story. The small garden in the backyard quickly became Connie O'Malley's refuge. In the early morning hours, while the house still slept under the greyish Hillsborough sky, she would slip away to that piece of land she was beginning to transform with her own hands. The abandoned flowerbed came to life as she pulled weeds, loosened the soil, and planted geranium, begonia, and violet seedlings she had bought with the little money she still kept in a cookie tin. "Don't you think you're spending too much on these plants?" Sandra asked one morning, watching Connie return from the garden with dirt under her nails and a sparkle in her eyes she hadn't shown in a long time. "Water is expensive in this region, and this garden won't bring any practical benefit to the house." "I've always had plants, Sandra," Connie replied without looking up. "They brighten the house and purify the air." "Flowers don't pay bills," Sandra retorted, leaving the room without waiting for an answer. That was just the first of many small provocations. As the weeks passed, Connie noticed subtle changes in the household routine. Breakfast, once served to everyone together, began to be left for her on a simple tray, often with day-old bread. Main meals, when she wasn't forgotten to be called, took place in a silence broken only by conversations between Sandra, Roger, and the grandchildren, as if Connie were invisible. Her room, which was supposed to be temporary, seemed increasingly permanent. Roger's promises to find a better space were replaced by excuses about expensive and unnecessary renovations. The old wardrobe barely held her clothes, and the thin mattress made her back ache in the morning, but complaining meant hearing about how difficult it was to care for an elderly person and how many sacrifices the family was making. It was Mr. Sebastian, the neighbor, who first noticed the changes in Connie. During one of their gardening conversations across the fence separating the properties, he observed, "Mrs. O'Malley, you look thinner. Are you eating properly?" Connie adjusted the loose coat over her shoulders and forced a smile. "It's old age, Mr. Sebastian. We lose mass over time. I'm old too, and Daisy makes sure I never lack for anything at my table," he replied, unconvinced. By the way, she asked why you never come over for coffee anymore. The question caught Connie by surprise. She lowered her eyes to the violets she was planting, trying to hide her embarrassment. How could she explain that Sandra had suggested that she avoid gossiping with the neighbors and only go out when accompanied by a family member? I'm very busy with the garden, Mr. Sebastian. I'll visit you soon. Sebastian nodded, but his worried eyes followed Connie as she walked back into the house, moving as if carrying an invisible weight on her shoulders. Inside the house, a new dynamic was established. Roger, once an attentive son who called daily to check on his mother, now barely spoke to her. He seemed always irritated or impatient when Connie tried to talk, and his short answers were punctuated by exasperated sighs, as if every word directed at his mother was a monumental effort. Son, I forgot to take my blood pressure medicine yesterday. I think it's running out, Connie commented during a rare moment when she found Roger alone in the kitchen. Mom, you can't keep forgetting these things. Do you know how much those medicines cost? He replied, without taking his eyes off his phone. Talk to Sandra. She's handling those things now. Connie felt her stomach sink. Since signing the power of attorney that gave Roger and Sandra access to her pension to facilitate bill payment, she rarely saw the money. She received small amounts for emergencies, always accompanied by comments about how expensive everything is and your pension barely covers your expenses. The hardcover diary became her most intimate confidant. Hidden among winter clothes at the back of the wardrobe, those pages were the only place where Connie could be honest about her feelings, without fear of reprisal. Today, Sandra complained about the time I spend in the garden, she wrote one night. She said it's a waste of water and that plants are a frivolity. It seems everything that brings me joy bothers them in this house. My own son no longer defends me, as if I have become a burden he carries out of obligation. Am I exaggerating? Sometimes I think I'm becoming paranoid with age. Doubts about her own sanity increased as Sandra subtly altered the reality around her. Connie's personal objects mysteriously disappeared. A gold wedding ring, a pearl brooch, old photographs, only for Sandra to suggest that your memory is failing, or that perhaps you put it somewhere and forgot. One afternoon, while watering her geraniums, Connie overheard a conversation coming from the kitchen window. Sandra and Roger's voices reached her clearly in the silence of the backyard. She's getting worse, Roger. Yesterday I found her talking to herself in the garden, Sandra said, her voice laced with false concern. What do you suggest? We can't just abandon her, Roger replied, his voice tired. Of course not, love, but maybe a specialized clinic, one with 24-hour nurses. The money from selling her share of the house would cover the initial costs. Connie felt her legs weaken. The watering can fell from her trembling hands, spilling water onto her feet. The idea of being sent to a clinic, a word that in her mind evoked images of abandonment and loneliness, made her heart race. Was this the plan all along? To take her from her home, seize her assets and then discard her? That night, alone in her room, Connie faced her reflection in the small mirror hanging on the wall. The wrinkled face that looked back at her seemed to belong to a stranger, a fragile and frightened woman, so different from the strong, independent teacher she had been for decades. But behind the tired eyes, a spark of determination still shone. I will not let them reduce me to nothing, she whispered to herself. The next day, during breakfast, Sandra entered the kitchen with a rehearsed smile and a paper in her hand. Mrs. O'Malley, we need your signature on this document. It's just formality to update the bank registration. Connie took the paper with deliberately trembling hands, pretending difficulty reading. I don't have my glasses, Sandra. Can you read it to me? It's just bureaucracy, Mrs. O'Malley. To facilitate access to your benefits and take better care of you. Sandra pushed a pen towards her. Roger has already checked everything. He's already late for work and needs to take this today. Connie recognized the strategy, the rush, the pressure, the lack of clear explanations, the same tactics that had resulted in the gradual loss of her autonomy until then. But this time, she was prepared. I'll ask Mr. Sebastian to read it to me later. He understands these document things. He was a banker. Sandra's smile froze. "There's no need to bother the neighbors with family matters, Mrs. O'Malley." "It's no bother. He offered to help me with papers since my eyesight is getting weak." Sandra snatched the document with a sharp movement, her mask of gentleness momentarily forgotten. "We'll sort this out later." When Sandra left, Connie allowed herself a small smile of victory. That night she wrote in her diary, "Today I realized I still have a voice. Small, trembling but mine. And as long as I have a voice, I will not be completely silenced." What Connie didn't know was that her small rebellion had set in motion events that would forever change the dynamic of that house. Sandra, furious at the unexpected resistance, began to devise more aggressive plans, and Roger, increasingly blinded by his wife's influence, was about to cross a line of no return. On the other side of the fence, Mr. Sebastian and Mrs. Daisy watched with growing concern. "Something's wrong in that house," Sebastian commented to his wife, "and I think we need to do something before it's too late." Meanwhile, in the small backyard garden, Connie's geraniums bloomed, red as the courage she would need to gather for the days to come. The Blue Ridge winter of Hillsborough arrived with its characteristic mist, enveloping the town in a cold embrace that seemed to penetrate the walls of the yellow house. For Connie, however, the most biting cold did not come from outside, but grew within her own family, spreading through the corridors like an invisible frost. On a particularly cold morning, Connie woke earlier than usual. Her bones ached with the dampness, but she ignored the discomfort and went to the kitchen to prepare some tea. She was surprised to find Sandra already awake, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and an expression that hardened when she saw her. "Good morning, Sandra," Connie greeted, trying to maintain the cordiality that grew more difficult each day. "You're using too much sugar," Sandra replied without returning the greeting, watching Connie prepare her tea. "And that fennel tea isn't in the household budget." Connie paused, her spoon suspended over the cup. "I bought this tea myself, Sandra, with the money Mary Ann gave me for my birthday." "Mary Ann gave you money?" Sandra's tone rose, indignant. "She shouldn't do that without consulting us. Teenagers don't understand finances." That small exchange was just an example of the increasingly suffocating control Sandra exerted over all aspects of Connie's life. In recent weeks, even the time she spent in her garden had become a source of discord. "Your garden is attracting insects to the house," Sandra had complained days earlier. "And it's consuming too much water. We'll need to limit watering time." The garden, the only space where Connie still felt like her own person, was now under threat. An outdoor faucet, once always available, had been fitted with a padlock, and Connie had to ask permission to use it, like a child asking permission to play. That same morning, after the tense breakfast, Connie took advantage of Sandra's departure for a work meeting and went to Roger's office. She needed to talk to her son, try to reach him, make him see what was happening. She found him concentrating on papers, his brow furrowed in concern. "Son, can I talk to you for a minute?" Roger looked up, impatient. "What is it now, Mom?" "I wanted to talk about how things are difficult for me here." Roger put down his pen, sighing as if this conversation were an inevitable ordeal. "Difficult how, Mom? You have a roof over your head, food, clean clothes. Many elderly people would like to have the comfort you have." The words hit Connie like small knives. Comfort? Was that how he saw her situation? Living in a makeshift room, having her money controlled, being treated as a burden? "It's not about material comfort, son. It's about dignity. Sandra controls every penny I spend, every minute of my day. I even have to ask permission to water my plants." "Sandra is just being responsible, Mum. Your pension barely covers your medical expenses. If we didn't control everything, we'd already be in the red." Connie swallowed hard. It was a lie, and she knew it. Her pension as a state teacher, plus the pension left by Anthony, was more than enough for her needs. In fact, she suspected the money was being used for other purposes. "Roger, I'd like to see my bank statements. After all, it's my money." Her son's face hardened. "Are you distrusting me, Mom, after everything we do? For you?" "It's not distrust, it's my right." "Your right." Roger stood up, his voice dangerously rising. "Do you know what your right is? You should be grateful we're not putting you in a nursing home. Sandra wanted to do that from the beginning, but I insisted on bringing you here. And this is how you thank us, with distrust?" The lie was so evident that Connie couldn't hold back her tears. It was she who had offered the house, her house, to live with her son, not the other way around. But now the story was being rewritten, and she was being painted as ungrateful. "Son, I just want—" "Enough, Mom!" Roger slammed the table, making Connie recoil in fright. "Go take care of your plants and let the adults manage the important things." Trembling, Connie withdrew from the office. In the hallway, she found Mary Ann, her 16-year-old granddaughter, who had clearly heard the argument. The teenager looked at her grandmother with a mixture of pity and embarrassment, but said nothing. She simply averted her gaze and continued on her way, as if afraid of being associated with that frail old woman. That afternoon, while silently tending to her plants, Connie noticed Mr. Sebastian at the fence watching her. "Mrs. O'Malley," he called in a low voice, "is everything all right? We heard yelling earlier." Connie forced a smile. "It was just a silly argument, Mr. Sebastian. Family matters." The neighbor didn't seem convinced. "If you need to talk, Daisy and I are always around. The fence isn't so high that one can't jump over in case of need." There was a deeper meaning in his words, and Connie understood the message. She had allies nearby if she needed them. "Thank you, Mr. Sebastian, I'll remember that." That night, as she wrote in her diary, Connie was interrupted by soft knocks on the door. It was Mary Ann, looking nervous and constantly glancing over her shoulder. "Grandma," the girl whispered, "I brought this for you." She held out a small package. "They're pansy seeds. I bought them at the flower shop near school, and this too." She handed her a small envelope. Connie opened the envelope and found some banknotes. Her eyes filled with tears. "My dear, I can't accept—" "Please, Grandma," Mary Ann insisted. "It's from my part-time job at the diner. You need it more than I do." She hesitated and then added, "Mom doesn't let me give you presents anymore. She says you manipulate us to get things." Connie felt her heart ache. So that's how Sandra portrayed her to the grandchildren, as a manipulative old woman. "I would never do that, Mary Ann. You know that, don't you?" The girl nodded, uncertain. "I know, Grandma, but Mom says you're getting confused, that sometimes you imagine things. And you believe that." Mary Ann looked away, torn between loyalty to her mother and affection for her grandmother. "I don't know what to believe anymore, but I don't like how they're treating you." After Mary Ann left, Connie carefully put the money in a false bottom she had created in the wardrobe. Along with the notes, she placed important documents she had managed to save: birth certificate, ID, some old bank statements. It was her small treasure of autonomy, hidden like a shameful secret. The following days brought a new escalation in the control exerted by Sandra and Roger. Under the pretext of worrying about her health, Sandra began to personally administer Connie's medications, giving her the pills by hand at each meal, as if she didn't trust her to manage her own medication. The phone, once available, was now locked in Roger's office. "To avoid unnecessary calls that increase the bill," he explained when Connie questioned. Her old cell phone had accidentally broken, and no one seemed to consider it important to replace it. Isolated, with restricted mobility and controlled communication, Connie began to see the plan in action. She was being deliberately cut off from the outside world, made dependent and submissive. It was a subtle form of abuse without visible marks, but equally devastating. On a particularly cold night, while everyone slept, Connie silently slipped into the kitchen for a glass of water. She was surprised to find Roger sitting at the table, a half-empty glass of whiskey in front of him, his face marked by an expression that mixed guilt and resentment. "Mom," he said, his voice slightly slurred by alcohol, "what are you doing awake?" "I came to get some water, son. Are you all right?" Roger laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "All right? Of course I'm all right. I have a wife who demands results I can't deliver, children who only know how to ask for money, and a mother who thinks I'm a monster." Connie approached cautiously, sitting across from her son. "I never thought that of you, Roger." "No?" He took a sip of his drink. "Sandra told me how you talk about us to the neighbors, how you complain about the treatment, how you say we mistreat you." "That's not true, son." I never said any of that. Roger studied his mother's face with cloudy eyes. For an instant, Connie glimpsed a spark of the boy he had been, sensitive, fair, incapable of cruelty. But the spark quickly faded. Sandra says you're becoming senile, that you'll soon need specialized care. He emptied his glass. I think she's right. It's only a matter of time. The words fell like stones into Connie's stomach, so the plan was still in motion to make her appear incapable, senile, in need of specialized care that would remove her from that house. Her house. Son, please think carefully about what you're doing. This isn't right. Roger abruptly stood up. What's not right is a mother doubting her own son. Sandra opened my eyes about you, about how you always manipulated me, how you used my father against me, how you always preferred your students to me. Connie recoiled, shocked by the distortion of her family history. Anthony had never been used against his son, and her work as a teacher, though demanding, had never diminished her love for Roger. That's a lie, son. Sandra is poisoning your mind against me. Enough! Roger threw the empty glass against the wall, shattering it. I won't listen to you talk about my wife like that. You'd better start accepting your situation, Mom. This is your place now, under our rules, our house, our life. If you can't accept that, maybe Sandra is right about that specialized clinic. Trembling, Connie returned. To her room, her heart pounding, the sound of broken glass still echoing in her ears. The son she had known and raised seemed to have been replaced by a bitter stranger, manipulated by a woman whose eyes gleamed with triumph at every small degradation inflicted upon her mother-in-law. That night, Connie wrote in her diary with trembling hands, "Today I realized I am in real danger. Not immediate physical danger, but something more insidious. The danger of having my identity, my autonomy and my dignity completely destroyed. They are trying to convince me that I am incapable, confused, ungrateful. And the worst part is that sometimes, for a moment, I almost believe them. I need to do something before it's too late, before I really start to doubt myself." Outside, the flowers in her small garden bravely resisted the cold of the Blue Ridge winter, just as Connie tried to resist the emotional winter that had settled in her life. But how long could she flourish in such hostile soil? Sunday morning dawned with a fine, persistent rain, typical of the Blue Ridge Mountains region. In the yellow house, the family gathered for Sunday lunch, a tradition Sandra insisted on maintaining less out of family affection and more as a social showcase for occasional guests. That day, the Thompson couple, important clients of the real estate agency where Sandra worked, had been invited, and the entire house mobilized to impress. "Mom, are you going to wear that?" Roger asked, observing with disapproval the simple but elegant dress Connie had chosen, a navy blue piece she kept for special occasions. "Yes, son, it's my Sunday dress." Roger exchanged a look with Sandra, who subtly rolled her eyes. "I think it's better if you stay in your room today, Mom. You're tired, and these visits always drag on." Connie felt her face burn. "But they're coming for lunch. I'd like to participate." "Mrs. O'Malley," Sandra interjected with false sweetness, "these are important people for our business. We need everything to be perfect." The message was clear. Connie was not part of the image of perfection they wanted to project. She was an element to be hidden, like a stain on the wall covered by a painting when visitors arrive. "I understand," Connie replied, swallowing the humiliation. "I'll stay in my room then." "Excellent," Sandra smiled, victorious. "I'll have Mary Ann bring you a plate later." Confined to her small, stuffy room, Connie listened to the distant voices and laughter from the dining room, feeling like a prisoner in exile. The thin walls allowed fragments of conversation to reach her, compliments on the decor, comments on the perfect seasoning of the bean stew, discussions about real estate investments. It was as if she were watching life through a blurred window, unable to participate in it. The promised meal only arrived late in the afternoon, after the guests had already left. It was a plate of cold leftovers, brought, not by Mary Ann, who had gone out with friends, but by Luke, her 14-year-old grandson, who seemed increasingly distant, as if he feared his grandmother's situation was contagious. "Thank you, Luke," Connie said, trying to make contact with her grandson. "How was lunch?" The boy shrugged, avoiding her gaze. normal. "Did your mum make that chocolate dessert you like?" "She did," he replied, already moving towards the door. Then, as if feeling a pang of guilt, he added, "Do you want me to bring you some?" Connie's face lit up at that small gesture of consideration. "I'd love some, dear." Luke returned minutes later with a minuscule portion of pudding, as if he feared being discovered in that act of kindness. "Don't tell Mum," he whispered, handing her the plate. "She said sweets are bad for diabetics." Connie felt her stomach sink. "Luke, I'm not diabetic." The boy frowned, confused. "But Mum always says you can't eat sugar because of diabetes." It was another lie, another form of control. Connie had high blood pressure, controlled with medication, but had never had diabetes. Sandra was building a false narrative about her health, probably to justify more restrictions. "Does your father know about this?" Luke shrugged again. "Dad just agrees with everything she says." When her grandson left, Connie sat on the edge of the bed, the plate of cold food forgotten beside her. The manipulation had reached a new level. Now Sandra was lying about her medical condition to her own grandchildren. How long until these lies became the accepted truth for everyone? How long until she herself began to doubt her own memory and health? That night, Connie couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in the narrow bed, thinking about how she had gotten into this situation. How had she allowed her life to be so completely usurped? The answer was simple and painful. Love. Love for her son, who even now she couldn't see as a villain, but as a victim of Sandra's manipulation. Love for her grandchildren, who were being alienated from her by carefully planted lies. Love for the family peace she had always tried to preserve, even at the cost of her own dignity. But there was a limit, and she was beginning to realize that it had been crossed a long time ago. The next morning, taking advantage of a rare moment when she was alone at home, Sandra had taken the children to school and Roger had left early for work. Connie gathered the courage to do something she had been planning for weeks. She went to Roger's office and, with trembling hands, began to look for documents related to her pension, bank accounts, and the house. She didn't have to look far. In a folder labeled Family Matters, she found bank statements that confirmed her darkest suspicions. Her benefits, which should have been used for her needs, were being systematically diverted to a joint account belonging to Roger and Sandra. Payments for a considerable loan, taken out in her name but of which she had never seen a cent, were deducted monthly. And most alarming, there was a preliminary sales contract for the house, her house, to a real estate developer, the same one Sandra worked for. The shock was so great that Connie had to lean on the desk to keep from falling. She was being robbed, not just of small amounts, but on a scale that meant her complete financial ruin. And the house, the last bastion of her independence, was about to be sold without her knowledge or consent. With trembling hands, she used Luke's old cell phone, which she had found forgotten on the sofa, to photograph the documents. She didn't know exactly what she would do with that evidence, but she instinctively knew she needed to preserve it. She was putting the phone away when she heard the front door open. She quickly put the documents back in the folder and left the office, her heart pounding in her chest. "What were you doing in the office?" Sandra's sharp voice cut through the air behind her as she was already in the hallway. Connie turned slowly, trying to control the trembling in her hands. "I was looking for paper to write a letter to my friend June." Sandra narrowed her eyes, suspicious. "You haven't been in contact with June for years. Roger told me she passed away." "Yes, but I like to write to her anyway, it comforts me." The lie came out naturally, surprising Connie herself with its ease. "How touching," Sandra commented sarcastically. "Next time, ask before entering the office. There are important documents there that you might confuse." "Of course, Sandra, I apologize." The rest of the day passed in a palpable climate of tension. Connie felt Sandra's gaze on her every move, like a hawk watching a mouse in a field. That night, when she finally retired, she discovered that her bedroom door now had a lock on the outside. "It's for your safety, Mom," Roger explained when she questioned him. "Sandra noticed you've been wandering around the house at night. You could fall, hurt yourself." "Son, this is ridiculous. Are you locking me in my room?" "Don't be dramatic, Mom. It's just a precaution. and temporary until we sort out a better situation for you." The better situation became clear the next morning, when Connie overheard Roger on the phone in the hallway, talking to someone about vacancies in nursing homes and voluntary admissions that can become compulsory in cases of cognitive impairment. The plan was underway and faster than she had imagined. That afternoon, while tending her garden under Sandra's watchful eye from the kitchen window, Connie saw Mr. Sebastian at the fence, signaling discreetly. She approached, pretending to examine a plant near the property line. "Mrs. O'Malley," he whispered, "something's wrong in this house. Daisy and I are worried." Connie hesitated. Years of conditioning made her want to deny, protect her family, hide the shame. But an inner voice, growing stronger with each humiliation, screamed that it was time to break the silence. "Yes, Mr. Sebastian," she replied in a low voice. "I need help." The neighbor nodded, understanding. "I have a friend, Nelson. He was a detective chief before he retired. I can ask him to come talk to you, discreetly." Connie cast a nervous glance at the kitchen window, where Sandra was still watching. "How? Tomorrow is the cleaner's day, isn't it? Sandra always leaves when she comes. I'll ask Nelson to come. As if he were a gardener offering services. You can talk to him while pretending to evaluate his work." The plan was simple, but risky. If they were discovered, the situation could drastically worsen. But what alternative was left? "All right," Connie agreed. "Tomorrow, then." The night was one of insomnia and anxiety. Connie knew she was taking a decisive step, a point of no return. Part of her still hesitated. It was her son and her family, after all. Exposing the situation meant admitting the failure of her family, the betrayal of her own blood. But another part, the one that grew stronger with each humiliation, knew there was no choice. It was her life, her dignity, her future that were at stake. The next morning, as expected, Sandra left shortly after the cleaner, Zelda, a simple woman who treated Connie with a respect that had become rare in that house, arrived. Zelda was one of the few people who still addressed Connie as teacher, remembering the time she had taught her daughters at the neighborhood school. "Teacher," Zelda called in a low voice while cleaning Connie's room, "you're looking so thin. Are they feeding you properly?" Connie smiled sadly. "It's all right, Zelda." The cleaner didn't seem convinced, but didn't insist. Instead, she whispered, "I brought a cornmeal cake I made yesterday. It's in my bag, in the laundry area. You can get it later, without anyone seeing." That small act of kindness almost made Connie cry. It was a reminder that there was still decency in the world, that not everyone saw an elderly woman as a burden or an obstacle. Around 10 in the morning, the doorbell rang. By the tone and rhythm, 3 short rings, Connie knew it was the agreed-upon signal. She went to the garden, where she found a middle-aged man, grey-haired and upright posture, simply dressed but with the unmistakable dignity of someone who had held a position of authority. "Good morning, ma'am," he greeted loud enough for Zelda to hear from the kitchen. "I came to offer gardening services. Your neighbor mentioned you have a beautiful garden here." "Good morning," Connie replied in the same tone. "Let's take a look then." While pretending to examine plants and discuss gardening techniques, Nelson, the former detective chief, listened carefully to Connie's account of months of psychological abuse, financial control, and isolation. Connie showed him the photos of the documents she had taken with Luke's phone, explaining about the diversion of her pension and the attempt to sell the house. "This is serious, Mrs. O'Malley," Nelson said when she finished. "What they are doing to you has a name. It is financial and psychological violence against the elderly. It is a crime provided for in the Elder Rights Statute." "Crime," Connie repeated, the word falling like a stone in her stomach. She knew she was being mistreated, but hearing that it was legally a crime gave a new dimension to the situation. "Yes, ma'am, and a serious one. What do you wish to do? We can notify the authorities, seek protective measures." Connie hesitated. The idea of taking her own son to court was too painful. "I don't want to harm Roger. He is being manipulated by Sandra." Nelson shook his head, understanding but firm. "I understand your feelings, Mrs. O'Malley, but your son is an adult responsible for his actions, and what is happening here could worsen, especially if they are planning to institutionalize you against your will." At that moment, The sound of a car parking in front of the house made Connie freeze. It was Sandra's vehicle, returning earlier than expected. "Go," she whispered urgently to Nelson. "We can't be seen together." Nelson nodded, discreetly handing her a card. "My number is here, and that of a lawyer specializing in elder rights, Dr. Beatrice Miller. Call if you need to, any time." He had barely left through the side gate when Sandra entered the garden, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Who was that man?" "A gardener offering services," Connie replied, tucking the card into her coat sleeve. "I told him we didn't need any." Sandra studied her face for a moment as if looking for signs of a lie. "You're very sociable lately, aren't you? First long conversations with Sebastian, now unknown gardeners." "I'm just a bored elderly lady, Sandra." The smile Sandra offered didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. Well, don't worry about boredom. Soon you'll have a new environment with many directed activities, specialists to take care of, people like you." The tone left no doubt about what was to come. The institutionalization plan was moving forward, and quickly. That night, alone in her room, now effectively her cell, Connie made a decision. She would not be a passive victim. She would not allow her life to be taken from her hands without a fight. With renewed determination, she wrote in her diary, "Today, I decided to break the silence. Not out of revenge or resentment, but out of self-love. For all the women my age who are silenced, controlled, diminished, for all the mothers who gave everything for their children only to be treated as burdens in old age. I am afraid, but I know it is the right thing to do. Tomorrow, I will take the first step to regain my freedom." Outside, the night was clear and starry, as was rarely seen in Hillsborough. In the small garden, Connie's geraniums shone under the moonlight, resilient and alive, just like her newfound determination. The sun had barely risen when Connie awoke to the sound of the key turning in her door lock. It was Roger, his face marked by an expression that mixed determination and something that could be guilt. "Good morning, Mom," he said, avoiding her gaze. "I need you to get ready. We have an important appointment today." Connie felt her heart race, the tone, the rush, the reluctance to face her. Everything indicated that the moment she so feared had arrived. "What appointment, son?" "Just a medical consultation to evaluate your situation." Roger finally looked at her, and Connie saw conflict in his eyes. For an instant, it seemed he wanted to say something more, perhaps explain, justify. But the moment passed and his expression hardened again. "Get dressed quickly. Sandra is preparing breakfast." When Roger left, Connie acted quickly. She knew she didn't have much time. From the false bottom in the wardrobe, she took out the card Nelson had given her and Luke's cell phone, which she had managed to hide. With trembling fingers, she dialed the lawyer's number, Dr. Beatrice Miller. "I need help," Connie whispered as soon as the lawyer answered. "I think they're going to institutionalize me today." The voice on the other end of the line was calm and firm. "Where are you now, Mrs. O'Malley?" "At home. My son said we have a medical appointment." "I understand. Nelson brought me up to speed on your situation. Can you get out of the house somehow? Go to a neighbor's house, perhaps?" Connie looked out the window at Mr. Sebastian and Mrs. Daisy's house. "Yes, I think so, but I need to be quick." "Do that then. Go to the neighbor's house and wait there. I'm leaving now to meet you. Do not sign any documents, no matter what they say." Connie hung up the phone and quickly dressed in the most practical clothes she had: sweatpants, a simple shirt, and a light coat. She put the little money she had managed to save and the diary where she had recorded everything in her pocket. Then she approached the window and assessed the distance to the ground. It wasn't very high, but for a 76-year-old woman, it represented a considerable challenge. The window opened to the garden side, partially hidden from the main windows of the house by some trees. If she was quick and silent, she might be able to reach the fence separating the properties without being seen. Praying that her knees would hold up, Connie climbed onto the sill, sat on the edge, and carefully let herself slide outside. The fall was softer than she expected, cushioned by a flower bed she herself had planted. With her heart pounding, she crouched among the plants and observed the house. There were no signs of movement in the windows facing the garden. Slowly, she began to move towards the fence. "Grandma, The voice almost made her scream with fright. Turning, she saw Mary Ann, her granddaughter, standing a few feet away, watching her with wide eyes. "Mary Ann, what are you doing here?" "I was going to get my volleyball that I left in the garden," the girl replied, confused. "Are you running away?" Connie felt panic rise. If Mary Ann alerted her parents, everything would be lost. "Mary Ann, dear, it's because of that clinic, isn't it?" The girl's voice was filled with emotion. "I heard Mom talking about it last night. She said it would be better for you, but what, dear?" Mary Ann bit her lip, undecided. Then, surprising Connie, she held out her hand. "Come on, I'll help you get to the fence. Mr. Sebastian is in his garden right now." With her granddaughter's help, Connie managed to cross the garden quickly, staying low to avoid being seen from the windows. When they reached the fence, Mary Ann quietly called for Mr. Sebastian, who soon came to meet them. "Mr. Sebastian, my grandma needs to stay with you for a bit," the girl explained, helping Connie pass through the small opening in the fence that the neighbor had discreetly widened days earlier. "Come, Mrs. O'Malley," Sebastian said, extending a hand to help her. "Daisy is already preparing coffee." Connie turned to her granddaughter one last time. "Thank you, Mary Ann. You are a brave girl." The teenager smiled, but her eyes were worried. "I'll go back inside before they notice. Grandma, are you going to be all right?" "Yes, dear. Don't worry about me." When Mary Ann disappeared back into the house, Mr. Sebastian quickly led Connie into his residence, where Mrs. Daisy awaited, anxious. "Good. Heavens, Connie, you're trembling," exclaimed Daisy, hugging her friend. "Come sit down. I've prepared strong coffee, and there's cornmeal cake too." While Connie drank her coffee, she explained the situation to her neighbors and mentioned that the lawyer was on her way. Sebastian, worried, constantly looked out the window. "They'll notice your absence soon," he commented, "and this will be the first place they come looking." As if to confirm his words, they heard shouts coming from the house next door. Sandra's voice, shrill and furious, called for Connie. Soon after, they heard violent knocking on the front door. It was Sebastian who answered, keeping the door only partially open. "Good morning, Sandra. Can I help you?" "Where is she?" Sandra demanded, trying to look over Sebastian's shoulder. "I know you're hiding that ungrateful old woman." "I don't know what you're talking about, Sandra. Don't lie to me." Sandra tried to force her way in, but Sebastian stood firm. "Mary Ann confessed she helped her grandmother come here. She's an elderly woman with severe cognitive problems. She needs medical care." At that moment, Roger appeared behind his wife, his face red with anger or shame. "Mr. Sebastian, please. She's my mother. We're trying to help her." "Help?" Connie's voice sounded from behind Sebastian, who reluctantly opened the door wider so she could be seen. "Is that what you call help? Locking me in my room? Diverting my money? Planning to institutionalize me against my will?" "Mum, you're not well," Roger said, his tone artificially softening. "You're confused, imagining things." "I'm not confused, Roger. I know exactly what's happening. I saw the documents in your office, the loan taken out in my name, the attempt to sell the house." Roger's face paled while Sandra let out a sound of disdain. "See? Delusions. Invading offices, imagining conspiracies. They are not delusions." A new voice joined the discussion. Everyone turned to see a middle-aged woman, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a formal suit. Beside her was Nelson, the former detective chief, and a few steps behind, a police car was discreetly parked. "I am Dr. Beatrice Miller, Mrs. O'Malley's lawyer, and we have concrete evidence of what has been happening in this house." The shock on Sandra's face was almost comical. "Lawyer? What kind of farce is this? Connie is a confused old woman who needs medical care. In fact," Nelson interjected, "what Mrs. O'Malley needs is protection against financial and psychological abuse, crimes provided for in the Elder Rights Statute." The mention of the word crime made Roger take a step back, as if he had been slapped. "This is absurd. Mom, tell them we're taking care of you." Connie felt a wave of sadness as she looked at her son, the boy she had raised with so much love, now transformed into a man capable of betraying her in such a way. But along with the sadness came a determination she hadn't felt in a long time. "No, Roger, you are not taking care of me. You are controlling me, diminishing me, robbing me, and that ends today." Dr. Miller stepped forward, taking charge of the situation. "Mr. Roger O'Malley, Mrs. Sandra O'Malley, we are here with a preliminary court order of protection for Mrs. O'Malley, based on the evidence presented by her and by witnesses. This order prohibits any unauthorized contact with her and prevents any financial or real estate transaction involving her assets." "This is ridiculous," Sandra exploded. "She's a senile old woman. Who's going to believe her against us?" "Justice," Beatrice replied calmly. "The photos of the documents Mrs. O'Malley took are quite clear. The diversion of her pension, the fraudulent loan, the attempt to sell the house without her consent, everything is documented. And we have witnesses to the degrading treatment she had been receiving." "What witnesses?" Sandra challenged, looking around as if searching for invisible enemies. "I am one of them," said Zelda, the cleaner, unexpectedly emerging from behind the police car. "I saw how they treated the teacher, how they hid food, how they locked her in her room, how they talked about her behind her back." "And I," added Mary Ann, appearing at the door of the yellow house, tears in her eyes but determination in her voice. "I heard Mum say that Grandma needed to be made to look crazy so they could sell the house and keep the money." Sandra turned to her daughter, her face contorted with fury. "You ungrateful traitor, after everything we've done for you." "Enough," one of the police officers accompanying Nelson intervened. "Mrs. Sandra, Mr. Roger, I ask you to step aside and let Mrs. O'Malley gather her belongings. As of now, she is under judicial protection." What followed was a tense hour, with Connie, accompanied by Beatrice and a police officer, collecting her few personal belongings from the house that had once been hers. Roger alternated between desperate pleas to his mother and heated arguments with Sandra, who blamed him for the situation. "Look what you've done," she yelled, not caring who heard. "You weakling, you couldn't even control your own mother." As she packed her clothes into a small suitcase borrowed from Mrs. Daisy, Connie found, hidden under the mattress, the old collar of the family dog, Duke, who had died years ago. An object that Sandra had kept, perhaps planning, to use it in some perverse way. The sight of that object, a symbol of an animal that had been treated with more dignity than she had in recent months, brought tears to Connie's eyes. When she finally left the house, accompanied by Beatrice, Nelson, and her neighbors, Connie did not look back. The weight she had carried on her shoulders for months seemed to have been partially lifted. She knew that the legal battle was only just beginning. There would be hearings, depositions, possibly a criminal case against her own son. But at that moment, for the first time in a long time, she felt free. "Where am I going now?" she asked Beatrice as they drove away from the yellow house. "For now, you will stay in a specialized shelter for vulnerable seniors," the lawyer replied. "It's a good place, with capable professionals, and it's temporary just until we resolve the issue of your house." "My house," Connie repeated, looking one last time at the building that had been her home for so many years. "Do you think I'll be able to get it back?" "I'm sure you will, Mrs. O'Malley," Beatrice affirmed with conviction. "The evidence is clear. What they did was illegal on several levels, but the process can take some time." "Time is one of the few things I still have, my dear," Connie smiled sadly. "And now, at least, I can use it however I want." As she got into Beatrice's car, Connie saw Mary Ann on the sidewalk watching her leave. Her heart ached at the thought of her granddaughter, the only one who had had the courage to defy her parents to help her. With a gesture, she called the girl closer. "I'll be all right, Mary Ann," she assured, holding her granddaughter's, hands in hers. "And don't worry, I don't hold a grudge against you or your brother. You are children, you couldn't have stopped what happened." "Grandma, I'm sorry," Mary Ann cried. "I should have done something sooner." "You did today, my dear, and that was more than enough." Connie caressed her granddaughter's face. "Promise me you'll study hard, that you'll be a strong and just woman?" Mary Ann nodded through tears. "I promise, Grandma." "Then I will be proud, no matter what happens." When the car finally departed, Connie allowed herself to cry, not tears of sadness or defeat, but of relief and a strange form of gratitude. Gratitude for having found the courage to stand up, for having people willing to help her, for having the chance to start over, even at 76. Beside her in the back seat was her diary, where she had recorded every humiliation, every abuse, every small victory. On the last page, written the night before, there was a sentence that now seemed prophetic. Some chains only break when we no longer fear the sound they will make when they fall. And the sound of those chains falling would echo for a long time, in the quiet streets of Hillsborough. 6 months had passed since the day Connie O'Malley left the Yellow House in Hillsborough. Autumn was arriving in the Blue Ridge Mountains region, painting the trees with golden and reddish hues that resembled the geraniums she loved so much. Sitting on the porch of her house, now legally and completely hers, Connie observed the changing landscape with a serene smile on her lips. The journey there had not been easy. The first days in the senior shelter, though surrounded by dedicated and kind professionals, were marked by nightmares and crying spells. Years of conditioning made her feel guilty for having exposed her family, for having betrayed her son. The social worker who accompanied her, Dr. Eliza, explained that those feelings were normal in victims of prolonged abuse. "You didn't betray anyone, Mrs. O'Malley," Eliza said firmly. "You were the one who was betrayed. And seeking justice is not revenge, it is healing." The legal battle had been long and exhausting. Roger and Sandra hired aggressive lawyers who tried in every way to discredit Connie, painting her as a confused elderly woman manipulated by envious neighbors. But the evidence was too solid. The bank statements showing the diversion of her pension, the fraudulent loan, the house sale documents signed without her consent. And there were the witnesses, Zelda, the cleaner, Mr. Sebastian and Mrs. Daisy. And, most painful for Roger and Sandra, the couple's own daughter, Mary Ann. Mary Ann's testimony had been the turning point in the process. With surprising maturity for her 16 years, the girl described in detail the conversations she had overheard between her parents, the plans to make Grandma seem crazy, the lies about her health, the daily humiliations. "My mother said it was necessary to control every penny Grandma had. Otherwise she would spend it all on foolish things," Mary Ann testified, her voice firm despite her tears. "But I saw them using her pension money for trips, expensive clothes, even the sweet 16 party they were planning for me, all with Grandma's money while she barely had decent clothes." The judge's sentence was clear and severe. The house would return entirely to Connie's possession. Roger and Sandra were to reimburse all diverted funds with interest, and a protective order prevented them from approaching Connie without prior authorization. Furthermore, a criminal investigation had been opened to investigate the crimes of elder abuse, embezzlement, and fraud. For Connie, however, the judicial victory had a bittersweet taste. She had recovered her home and her dignity, but she had lost her son. On the rare occasions when Roger had attempted contact through formal letters sent by his lawyer, he had shown no genuine remorse, only concern for the legal consequences of his actions. Sandra, for her part, had completely disappeared from her life, which, Connie admitted to herself, was a relief. But not all were losses. Mary Ann, who had decided to live with her maternal grandparents after the family scandal, visited Connie regularly. Luke, initially distant and confused, was beginning to timidly approach, encouraged by his sister, and new relationships had blossomed. Mr. Sebastian and Mrs. Daisy were constant presences in her life. Dr. Miller had become a friend as well as a lawyer, and the elder support group Connie had started attending brought new friendships that filled her days. More surprising, however, was the impact her story had on the community. After a local news report on the case, other families began to emerge, elderly people in similar situations, silenced by fear and shame, who now found the courage to seek help. Connie, the retired teacher who had once been reduced to a shadow in her own home, had become a symbol of resistance and hope. "Mrs. O'Malley?" Dr. Miller's voice interrupted her thoughts. The lawyer arrived for her weekly visit, carrying a folder with documents and a pot of red geraniums. "I brought some more flowers for your garden, and news," Connie smiled, indicating the chair next to hers on the porch. Her garden, now expanded beyond the small flower bed in the back, was a source of pride and joy. With the help of a professional gardener, ironically hired through Mr. Sebastian, she had transformed the space into a small paradise of colors and aromas. "What news, Beatrice?" The lawyer opened the folder with a triumphant smile. "The judge accepted our proposal. The house where the shelter that took you in, which was about to close due to lack of resources, will be maintained as a welcoming center for vulnerable seniors, And guess who will be the honorary coordinator of the project? Connie's eyes widened, surprised. Me. Exactly. Your experience as a teacher, coupled with your personal story, makes you the ideal person for the position. Of course, you will have the full support of social workers and specialized professionals, but you will be the heart of the project. The proposal was unexpected, but on second thought, it made perfect sense. In recent months, Connie had rediscovered not only her voice but also her purpose. The lectures she had begun giving at community centers on elder rights, the support groups she attended, the conversations with other people going through similar situations, all of this had awakened a new vocation in her. I accept, she replied without hesitation. When do we start? Beatrice laughed, pleased with the enthusiasm of the client who had become a friend. Calm down, we still have details to iron out. But the initial funding is already secured, thanks to that TV report and the donations that followed. The report Beatrice referred to had been broadcast 2 months earlier, part of a series on elder abuse. Connie, initially reluctant, had agreed to give her testimony, provided she was not portrayed as a victim, but as a survivor. The result had surprised everyone. The story had touched the public in such a way that a spontaneous campaign had arisen to support the shelter that had taken her in her moment of need. It's amazing how everything fits together, isn't it? Connie commented, looking at the newly arrived geraniums. A year ago, I was trapped in that house, believing my life was ending. And now I'm starting something new. You are extraordinary, Mrs. O'Malley, Beatrice said sincerely. You transformed a story of abuse into a movement of liberation, not just for yourself, but for so many others. Connie shook her head, modest. I didn't do anything alone. It was people like you, like Sebastian and Daisy, like Nelson, who extended a hand to me when I needed it most. But it was you who had the courage to accept that extended hand. Many cannot take that step. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mary Ann, accompanied by Luke. The 2 teenagers carried a small basket of fruit, and the shy smile of those still learning to rebuild bonds. Grandma, Mary Ann exclaimed, hugging Connie with enthusiasm. We brought guavas from the market, and Luke has some news. The boy, now 15, seemed nervous, swaying from one foot to the other. I got the scholarship to that technical IT school, he finally announced. The one you encouraged me to try for. Luke, how wonderful. Connie hugged her grandson, feeling the teenager's body, once tense, relax in her arms. I always knew you could do it. While Luke excitedly talked about the projects he planned to develop, Mary Ann discreetly pulled Beatrice aside, handing her an envelope. It's from Dad, the girl explained in a low voice. He asked me to give it to Grandma, but I don't know if I should. Could you check it first? Beatrice took the envelope, understanding. Of course, Mary Ann, I'll do that before I leave. The afternoon passed in an atmosphere of domestic tranquility that Connie had forgotten could exist. Luke helped plant the new geraniums in the garden. Mary Ann prepared a simple snack for everyone. Beatrice shared stories of other successful cases she was handling. It was a new form of family forming there, united not only by blood ties, but by conscious choices of affection and respect. When the grandchildren left, promising to return on Sunday, and Beatrice was preparing to leave, the lawyer finally handed her the envelope Mary Ann had brought. I read it, and there's nothing concerning, she assured, but the decision to open it is entirely yours, Connie. Alone on the porch, bathed in the golden light of the late afternoon, Connie contemplated the envelope for long minutes before opening it. Inside, there was a handwritten letter from Roger, the first personal communication since the break. Mum, the letter began, I don't know if I have the right to call you that after everything I've done. I don't expect forgiveness or even understanding. I just wanted you to know that I'm finally seeing clearly what happened. Sandra and I have separated. I'm in therapy, trying to understand how I could become a person capable of hurting the one I should protect most. It's not an excuse, just an attempt at explanation. I know words can't erase what I did, but I would like you to know that I deeply regret it. If one day, many years in the future, you can at least look at me without pain, that would be more than I deserve. With regret and respect, Roger. Connie folded the letter carefully and put it in her pocket. There was no anger in her heart, only a serene sadness that might never completely disappear. The future of her relationship with her son was uncertain, but at least there was a door ajar, not for a return to the past, but perhaps for a new beginning, cautious and conscious. As the sun set, Connie walked through the garden, gently touching the petals of the geraniums that bloomed, despite the arrival of autumn. Like those resilient flowers, she had survived her own season of drought and darkness, and now, at 77, she was flourishing in a way she never imagined possible. The next day she woke early, excited about the plans for the new welcoming center. As she drank her coffee on the porch, she saw a small stray dog appear at the gate, thin but with lively, curious eyes. "Hello, little friend," Connie called, extending her hand. "Are you lost?" The little dog approached cautiously, sniffing her outstretched hand before allowing a timid pet. It had no collar, just an expression of one who had also been through difficulties in life. "Want some milk?" Connie offered, getting up to fetch a saucer from the kitchen. When she returned, the dog was still there, as if it had decided that this was a good place to stay. As she watched it eagerly drink the milk, Connie made a spontaneous decision. "I think I'll call him Courage," she said aloud, "because that's what brought us here, wasn't it? Courage to start over, even when it seemed impossible." The dog raised its head, as if approving the name. No collar, no restraints, free to choose where and with whom to stay, just like her now. A few hours later, Connie would receive Beatrice to continue preparations for the welcoming center. Later, she would give a lecture at the community center on elder rights. On the weekend, her grandchildren would visit her. And sometime in the future, perhaps, she would have a difficult but necessary conversation with her son. Life went on, with its challenges and joys, its losses and discoveries. In the small garden that had been her refuge in difficult times, the geraniums swayed gently in the morning breeze, red as courage, resilient as hope, beautiful as rediscovered freedom. Connie smiled, feeling the silent but comforting presence of her new friend beside her. Some chains, when finally broken, free not only the body but also the soul, and a free woman, even at 77, has a whole world of possibilities ahead of her. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Connie O'Malley's story has touched your hearts. To follow more emotional narratives like this, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it by clicking the link to your left. If this journey of overcoming and rebirth touched your soul, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day, we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the power of human resilience. Share in the comments if you know someone like Connie O'Malley, who transformed adversity into strength. We look forward to reading your experiences.